I've said it before and I'll say it again. Other than declaring war, there is no greater presidential power than the ability to nominate justices to the Supreme Court who have the final word on the most controversial issues in the country and get to serve for the rest of their lives if they choose, often through many presidents. Now Donald Trump is getting a second chance to reshape the court in his image, and this one's a big one. After the man many felt was the lone swing vote, Justice Anthony Kennedy officially announced his retirement today, effective July 31st. So, who's next? Well, back when Trump was running for president, we asked him when he joined us on Boston Public Radio whether he had a litmus test for his Supreme Court nominees. Here's what he told us.
We want good, strong, conservative people that are extremely smart. I'm pro-life, and I would put in pro-life.
Trump's first appointee, Neil Gorsuch, has been all three. And after a slew of major rulings this week, we've seen just how much political ideology can come into play. The High Court declared it unconstitutional today to force public sector workers to pay union dues, even as they continue to get union services. And yesterday, they upheld Trump's travel ban and declared pregnancy centers do not have to offer information on abortion as an option. In all three cases, the vote was 5-4, with Justices Gorsuch and Kennedy both in the majority, along with the other conservatives. But Kennedy has also been the deciding vote the other way, too, on legalizing gay marriage, declaring it unconstitutional to impose capital punishment for crimes committed by those under the age of 18, and ruling the Military Commissions Act was being used to illegally hold people at Guantanamo Bay. So, now that he will be gone, what does that mean for the future of the court? Joining me are Kent Greenfield, who's a constitutional law professor at Boston College. Good to see you, Kent. David Zimmer is an attorney at Goodwin who recently won a case before the Supreme Court over deportation proceedings. David, it's good to meet you. Thanks so much for being here. So assuming that Kennedy is replaced by a justice in the image of his former clerk, Neil Gorsuch, it seems to me that a significant number of 5-4 cases where Kennedy was in the liberal majority could be at risk. Is that not a fair conclusion?
I think that's absolutely fair. I think that especially talking about cases going forward and talking about some of the implications of how the court might have or might have extended some of the decisions where Justice Kennedy has been the fifth vote, I think those cases are likely to be limited.
We were talking to Senator Elizabeth Warren on the radio today. This is before Kennedy announced his retirement. And I said, assuming that Donald Trump, and I'm paraphrasing our discussion, got another pick at some point, are you worried, particularly in light of the California case around these pregnancy centers, are you worried about the future of Roe v. Wade? And she said, one-word answer, yes. Is she right to worry?
I think it's unclear. I mean, I think she's certainly right to worry, but, I think that would be a big step to actually go so far as to reverse Roe. I think there's a lot that, as the court has shown over the last couple of years, the court could do to just sort of limit its effect without actually reversing it. And I think that trend certainly would continue. What do you worry about? I mean, as I said, the affirmative action cases, death penalty, penalty for people under 18, the whole thing could be up for grabs at some point, yes?
And this is one of the things that I think David is right about with regard to Kennedy's opinions over the course of the time that he's been on the court. A lot of his opinions don't have that intellectual rigor that we're used to seeing from Kagan or Scalia, for example. And so even in the abortion cases, the standard is undue burden. It's not, and that's open to a lot of interpretation. So going forward, they don't have to overturn Roe. They just have to say, oh, some limitations on abortion are not undue burden. The same is true about the gay rights opinions that he is famous for writing. A lot of those opinions sound good and have this great language in them, but they don't have a lot of great holdings in them.
Yeah, I talked to a couple of people who were, I think it's fair to say, despairing this afternoon. Yep. And the thing they were holding their hopes on was, a couple of people cited, because we've all been talking about a Japanese-American internment lately, well, Earl Warren was Attorney General through when FDR was doing this thing, and then he went on to be one of the most progressive, ultimately most liberal justices. Those kind of flips, though, are more the exception rather than the rule, are they not?
Especially these days, right? The justices are much more vetted now than ever before, and we know what the justices think and believe, and I don't think there's going to be any surprises.
Were you surprised by this? I have to say, while the rumors have been out there forever, and you clerked for Kagan, we should say, for Justice Kagan,
right,
so
yeah.
you've spent time there. In one of my many wrong predictions, when I read the travel ban case yesterday, I read the concurring opinion by Kennedy in which he said, and this is just a piece of it, there are numerous instances in which the statements and actions of government officials are not subject to judicial scrutiny or intervention. This does not mean those officials are free to disregard the Constitution, the rights it proclaims and protects. I was saying he's talking to Donald Trump. He's basically saying you have a constitutional right as the president to do this, but don't keep crossing the line. I said to myself, this guy's not going anywhere because he's worried about what Trump may do. Were you surprised?
I was surprised, both for that and in general, it definitely came as a surprise to me. And I think that, as it turns out, I think what he meant was that he is leaving, and he wanted to leave a message that to maybe his successor and maybe to President Trump in nominating his successor, that these rights are important.
I don't know what you're allowed to talk about from your days there, but is there, there's so much pressure on the Ruth Bader Ginsburgs of the world, who's 85 years old. Here's the age, and by the way, how long all these the current justices have been there. She's had cancer, I think, 2 times. She's 85 years old. Steve Breyer, another liberal, 79 years old, that kind of thing. Do they ever talk about the immense pressure on them, either conservatives from the conservative supporters or liberals from the liberal supporters, to stay there till their last breath? I mean,
they certainly didn't talk about it with me, but I'm 100% sure that they're aware of that pressure. I think that, that's a choice that they have to make that involves a lot of personal and professional considerations, and I think the structure puts them in a hard position.
One of the reasons why I think I was surprised about this is because if justices are concerned about their legacy, and Kennedy, I can't imagine a person more different as a personal matter than Donald Trump. Kennedy is civil and courteous and nice to people around him, and it seems like Donald Trump embodies everything that he stands against as a human being.
No one's going to throw him out of a restaurant.
Right.
Another person for whom I assume yesterday and the day before were great victories, and today as well, is Mitch McConnell. We've all seen this photograph about 10,000 times the last day or so, where he's extending his hand to Neil Gorsuch. He's the one who single-handedly ensured that with 11 months to go in his presidency, Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, would not even get a hearing, much less a vote. There's far less time post-July 31st in terms of when the American people will decide who's to sit in the United States Senate and who will decide, I don't know if this one will be earlier than that, but ultimately decide who to confirm or who not to confirm. That won't matter to anybody. The equitable issue there,
of course not
at all. So the bottom line is there's going to be a nomination in short order, and the Republicans who control are going to be sure to confirm that nominee before they might lose control come January of next year.
And what that will mean is that 14 out of the last 18 justices will have been nominated and appointed by a conservative, as a Republican president, by a Republican president.
This has potential to be seen. I usually don't make these kind of grand statements here, even though I often feel this could be a major day in American history, the retirement of this man. Could it not?
Absolutely. Certainly a major day for the history of the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, there are a lot of issues that are really hanging in the balance right now in terms of both the First Amendment's application to a whole number of areas and the implications of some of the gay marriage decisions, and this will fundamentally change how those decisions apply.
In our history, when there has been an ideological imbalance in the court, which there will be in all likelihood once Kennedy's success, likely 6-3, and as you both were saying to me before, Justice Roberts has been the swing vote on a couple of things, even though a conservative bent he may be again, but when it's 6 votes as opposed to 5, it's more difficult. What kinds of things that are memorable have come out of the Supreme Court when either liberals have overwhelmingly controlled the majority or conservatives have, Ken?
Well, I mean, I think this, for the last couple of decades, this court, for the most part, has been a pretty conservative court, I mean, with the exceptions of the gay rights cases and the like. And I think what happens politically is that people start knowing and realizing that the Supreme Court matters and that elections matter. Traditionally, Americans don't vote on the Supreme Court one way or the other. It's one of those many things down on the list that people consider. But
this is only anecdotal, but I've been in New Hampshire for every primary season. For a few decades, Republicans take the Supreme Court much more seriously when voting in presidential elections. And again, this is not scientific.
And progressives are going to have to learn that.
Than progressives do, and they're far more single-issue voters. On the Steve Breyer, Justice Breyer was here a couple of years ago. I am not a believer in lifetime tenure. I know it leads to independence and that sort of thing, but it also leads to less accountability in my estimation. I asked him about the notion of term limits for justices. Here's what Justice Breyer had to say.
I would say there should be a long tenure. Whether it's a term of years or not, maybe it would be better to have a term of years, but it must be long, because you don't want a person in that job thinking about his next job.
Neil Gorsuch is 50 years old. He looks like a healthy guy. Just for people at home, he could be there through 10 presidents. There could be the most radically left president, and he'd be there, the most radically right president. There's something wrong with this picture, David, isn't there?
It is odd, and I think that if you look at Massachusetts, actually, it has exactly what Justice Breyer is talking about.
Mandatory retirement at 70.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the nice thing about that is it happens when you turn 70, whoever the governor happens to be. And I think that one of the big problems with the current system is it creates the incentives you were talking, or the pressure that you were talking about for people to time their retirement, which is a real problem. And I think it has a really negative impact on the process for choosing and who's on the Supreme Court, which is obviously an incredibly important question.
You're the constitutional law professor. Could you live with the terms for these justices? Or are you one of those people that say they need lifetime tenure to be independent?
I could live with that. I mean, traditionally the notion is that it's good to have these lifetime terms so that they can be insulated from politics. But once politics gets injected into the court like it has been.
You call it politics, I call it democracy.
Right.
Very quickly, who's the next justice of the Supreme Court?
Somebody like Gorsuch, but I don't know.
You?
I have absolutely no idea. I think it could be someone like Gorsuch. It could be someone far more to the right than Gorsuch.
On that note, nice to see you. Pleasure to meet you, David. Thanks
You
so
too.
much for being here. Really appreciate it.